Hello everyone, my name is Jonathan Susamil and I'm a Writing Center consultant and history major here at the University of South Dakota. Today I'm going to show you how to format your paper and sources according to the Chicago Manual of Style 16th edition using Microsoft Word 2016 for Mac. The paper you see in front of you now was generously donated by a student, and we've stripped it of all its previous formatting for the purpose of this explainer video. Now, as I said, the guidelines and instructions I give will adhere strictly to the Chicago Manual of Style 16th edition. It's possible that your instructor may have given alternate instructions for a few elements of Chicago we will discuss, so if the instructions given by your professor contradict my own, you should probably go with what they advised. First, let's make sure that everyone has the same formatting options and tools in front of them. Click on the View tab, and then make sure that Print Layout in the upper left-hand corner is selected. You'll also want to make sure that the checkbox appears next to the Ruler menu item. If it doesn't, click it, and rulers will appear along the top and left sides of your pages. This will help us make sure our margins and indentations are correctly set. Chicago instructs us to use 1-inch margins on all sides of the paper. 1 inch on all sides is likely set as the default already, but to double check, let's click on the Layout tab, and then the Margins button. In the drop-down menu that appears, you should see a normal option with 1 inch set on all sides. If you don't see a normal option, you can click on the Custom Margins menu item at the bottom of the drop-down menu. A window marked Document should appear, and you'll be able to manually set the top, bottom, left, and right margins to 1 inch from here. Before accepting the changes by hitting OK, make sure that you have selected Apply to Whole Document from the drop-down menu at the bottom. Now hit OK. Next, let's discuss the formatting of the body of the text. For academic research papers, Chicago instructs students to double space and left justify their body text. To do this, you must first select all the text in the document. Move your mouse to the top of the screen, click once, and then from the top menu that appears, we'll select Edit. From the drop-down menu, we'll then choose Select All. The text should now appear within a blue background. Click on Format at the top of the screen, and then select Paragraph from the drop-down menu. This button should launch a window labeled Paragraph. From here, you'll be able to double space your body text by selecting Double from the Line Spacing drop-down menu, below Spacing. You'll also want to make sure no extra space appears in between paragraphs, making sure that the check mark appears in the box labeled Don't Add Space Between Paragraphs of the Same Style. While we're in this window, we can also set our indentations by selecting First Line from the Special drop-down menu and making sure that point 5 appears in the box to the right. Hit OK to save your changes and close the paragraph window. While the 16th edition doesn't require the use of a specific font, they do recommend the use of Times New Roman. You can change your font to Times New Roman by clicking on the Home tab and selecting it from the Font drop-down menu in the top left-hand corner of the menu ribbon. The menu lists fonts in alphabetical order, so you may have to scroll down to the T's. If you want, you can also select a font by typing into the top of the drop-down menu. Chicago style mandates that writers use font sizes no bigger than 12 and no smaller than 10 point. You can change your font using the drop-down menu immediately to the right of the font menu. Now that we've completed formatting the body of the text, we can deselect by clicking anywhere on the page. Next, let's create our title page. When using Chicago style, writers are instructed to include a title page that contains the paper's title, author, class, and date of submission. To start, let's insert a new page using Word's page break function. Click your cursor at the beginning of your first paragraph, then select Insert from the top menu. Hover over Break from the drop-down menu, and then select Page Break from the side menu that appears. You should now have a blank page at the beginning of your document with only a title at the top. Chicago Style recommends that you list your title centered a third of the way down the page in all caps. First, let's make sure that Word hasn't automatically inserted an indentation in front of our title. Click immediately to the left of the first word of your title and hit the backspace key. Then hit Enter 5 to 6 times. Next, select your entire title and click on the center icon. This should center your title in the middle of the page, with equal space on both sides. Now, capitalize each letter in your title by selecting the Case drop-down menu and clicking on the third item labeled Uppercase. Chicago also requires us to add the author, class, and date on the title page. To do this, let's click to the right of the title and then hit Enter 8 to 10 times. Then, type the author's name, the class name, and the due date all on separate lines. Finally, let's add page numbers for the paper. Unlike an MLA or APA, Chicago does not require a special title or name in the header, simply a page number in the upper right-hand corner. Unfortunately, unlike an MLA or APA, the Chicago Manual of Style tells us not to number the title page, so we have to go through a couple extra steps. First, double-click on the very top of your title page. This should open a special Header and Footer tab on the ribbon at the top of the window. Now, make sure that the box for Different First Page is unchecked within the Options section of the ribbon. Now, we'll click on the Page Number drop-down menu in the upper left-hand corner of the screen and select Format Page Numbers. A dialog window labeled Page Number Format should appear. Under the page numbering heading, make sure that Start At is selected and type 0 in the box. Click OK and then select the Page Number drop-down menu again. However, now we'll select the page number item. And from the window that appears, we'll choose Top of Page and Right. Hit OK. The page numbers, starting with 0 on the title page, should now appear in the upper right-hand corner. Now all we have to do is remove the 0 from the title page. To do this, we simply recheck the box next to Different First Page, and the 0 is deleted. Now that we've formatted the document and inserted page numbers into title page, let's discuss the formatting requirements of Chicago citations. Chicago Style utilizes two documentation styles. In this video, we'll discuss Chicago's Notes Bibliography method, which is the most commonly used. If your instructor has asked that you use Chicago's other documentation style, the author date method, check out our other Chicago Manual of Style video for Mac, which we've linked to in the video description. Chicago's Notes Bibliography documentation method is made up of two parts, the notes and the bibliography. We'll start by looking at the formatting content of Chicago Style notes. In Chicago Style, notes are used in the same way that in-text citations are used in APA, MLA, and other citation styles, to show the reader where the author learned or obtained a given piece of information. Notes, like in-text citations, are used not only when directly quoting text from another document or author, but also when paraphrasing or referring to information obtained from an outside source. In Chicago Style, notes come in two forms: footnotes, which appear at the bottom of the page of the referenced information, and endnotes, which appear at the end of the document. The authors of the Chicago Manual of Style leave this choice for the author, and do not indicate a preference for either, but your professor will likely have indicated whichever she/he prefers, so be sure to check your instructor's formatting guidelines carefully. If your instructor doesn't list a preference, then the choice is up to you. I prefer footnotes because they allow me to double-check the footnote information quickly as I revise and proofread, but some prefer endnotes because they make it easier to judge the true length of a document and prevent interruptions in the flow of the paper. At the moment, this document uses footnotes, but in Word, it's very easy to switch back and forth from footnotes to endnotes. If you'd like to switch between one or the other, first highlight all of the notes by clicking to the left of the first note, and then, while holding the mouse button down, dragging the cursor down to the bottom of the document. When you've reached the bottom, hold the Control button on your keyboard while clicking the mouse button, and from the menu that appears, select Convert to EndNote, or Convert to Footnote, depending on which style you're using at the moment. Note that, now that I've converted my footnotes to endnotes, all my notes now appear at the very end of the document. Now, let's look at how to construct a footnote for two of the most commonly used document types, books or monographs, and journal articles. Let's begin with a monograph, or book. I've removed a previously included citation so I can walk you through the insertion and construction process step by step. First, insert your cursor at the end of the sentence containing the information you're citing. Your footnote and endnote marking will always come at the end of the sentence. Now, click on the References tab, and then click Insert Endnote, or Insert Footnote, depending on your preference. Your cursor should automatically jump down to the note listing at either the bottom of the page or the end of the document. When citing a monograph in a foot or endnote, Chicago instructs us to first list the author's name. Note that, unlike in the bibliography we will discuss in a few minutes, in a note, the author's last name does not come before his or her first name. Next, we will list the title of the book. Use a comma to separate the author's name from the title. In Chicago style, the book name is italicized or slanted. So, before we begin typing, click the italics icon in the font section of the Home tab underneath the Font Type drop-down menu. Your flashing cursor should now appear slanted. Now, type the book title. Next, Chicago instructs us to include the publication information. Click the italics icon again to turn off italics. And then, in parentheses, type the city of publication, followed by a colon, the publisher, a comma, and the year of publication. All this information can typically be found at the front of the book. Finally, type the page number of the book where you found the information you are citing. If the information is found in two or more concurrent pages, you can indicate this with a hyphen. If you found the information on multiple non-concurrent pages of the same source, you can separate the page numbers with commas. End the footnote with a period. One rule to remember is that there will only be one period per footnote, typically at the end of the footnote after the page number or final piece of information. All other sections are separated by comma or other punctuation. Next, let's insert an endnote for a journal article. This paper didn't originally cite any journals, so I've selected a relevant journal article for the purpose of this exercise. As before, we'll insert a note into the appropriate place by clicking our cursor at the end of the relevant sentence, and then clicking the References tab, and then either Insert Footnote or Endnote. Like before, we'll start with the author's first and last name, followed by a comma. Now, we'll list the title of the article. Unlike when citing a book or monograph, this title will not be italicized, but instead framed in quotes. After the title, place a comma inside the end quotation. Now, we'll list the name of the journal the article was published in. Like with the title of the monograph or book, the journal title is italicized. After the journal title, we'll include the volume number. Make sure to turn off italics. List the issue number, making sure to separate it from the volume number with a comma. Chicago denotes the issue from the volume number by including the abbreviation for number, NO period. Not all journals will include issue numbers, so if you can't find one, just leave it out. After listing the issue number, we next must include the year of publication in parentheses, followed by a colon, and the page number of the information you are citing. If you found your journal in a non-digital format or a PDF file not accessed online, you can end your note citation here with a period. However, since I found this article online, I need to include a few extra pieces of information. First, I must list the date I accessed or downloaded the document. Then, I can list either the DOI or the link where the document can be accessed. Feel free to remove the hyperlink automatically inserted by Word. To do this, hold Ctrl and click on the URL, and then select Hyperlink and remove Hyperlink from the side menu. End the citation with a period. Unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss every type of footnote citation, but I've left a link in the description of this video that leads to the Chicago Manual of Style website, which lists almost every other type of document you may need to cite. Now, let's talk about truncated citation notes. When writing your paper, you'll probably need to cite a source more than once. When reciting a source that you cited most recently, you don't have to restate the author, document title, or publication information. Instead, Chicago instructs us to use an abbreviation for the Latin word abitum, which means in the same place. When the reader sees this abbreviation, she or he will know to look to the previous footnote containing document information. Note that, if you are citing a piece of information on the same page of the same document as you last cited, you don't need to restate the page number. However, If you are citing information from the same source but a different page, you should state the new page number. Finally, if you cite a source multiple times non-concurrently, you also don't need to include all the information included in the initial citation we constructed together. Instead, you should include only the author's name, an abbreviated version of the title, and the page number on which you found the information. Now, let's move on to the bibliography. According to the Chicago Manual of Style, the bibliography should begin on its own page at the end of the document. And, since some of us are using endnotes, we have to go through a small but specific process to make sure that the bibliography begins after the endnotes. First, click to the right of the last word of your document. Then, click on the Layout tab and the Breaks option in the upper right-hand corner of the Page Setup section. In the drop-down menu that appears, select Next Page in the Section Breaks area. Your screen should now jump to a new page at the very end of your document. To start, label your bibliography by typing Bibliography and centering it in the page. Your bibliography will include one entry for each of the sources cited in your foot or endnotes. Some instructors may also want you to include other sources that you consulted but did not refer to while writing. Now, let's walk through bibliographic entries for two of the most common types of documents: books or monographs, and journal articles. Begin by listing the author's name. Because we're making an entry for a bibliography that will later be alphabetized by author's last name, list the author's last name, followed by a comma, and then the first name, followed by a period. Next, we'll list the book title in italics, like we did with the notes, but end with a period instead of a comma. Finally, we'll include the city of publication, followed by a colon, the publisher name, a comma, and the year of publication. We'll end the entry with a period. Notice that the bibliographic entry for a book is very similar to the footnote or endnote format, but as a general rule, bibliographic entries use periods instead of commas to separate the different sections of a citation. Bibliographic entries for journal articles share even more in common with their corresponding footnotes. Aside from inverting the author's name, the only difference between the two is that periods replace some of the commas. First, begin by listing the author's name, making sure to list the last name first, followed by a comma, and then the first name, followed by a period. Next, list the title of the article in quotation marks, ending with a period inside the final quotation. Then, list the journal in italics, followed by the volume number, a comma, the issue number, if it exists, and the year of publication in parentheses. After the year of publication, include a colon, and then list the page numbers for the entire article, not just the pages where you found the information you used. As with footnotes, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to show you how to format a bibliographic entry for every potential type of source, but I've included a link in the description of the video that leads to the Chicago Manual of Style website, which contains formatting instructions for additional source types. Okay, now that we've populated our bibliography page with all our sources, we need to make sure that our sources are alphabetized so they can easily be located using the information you listed in the notes above. To alphabetize your sources, click and hold your left mouse button to the left of your first entry, and while holding your mouse button, drag your cursor down the screen until it passes your final entry. Then, let go of the left mouse button, and click on the alphabetize symbol in the Home tab. A window labeled Sort Text should appear. Make sure that Paragraph is selected from the first drop-down menu, and then hit OK. Your entry should now be alphabetized by author's last name. Finally, we also have to implement a hanging or reverse indentation style for our bibliography page. So, before deselecting the text, go to Format in the top menu and click on Paragraph. From the window that appears, select Hanging from the Special menu. Then, hit OK. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check out the University of South Dakota's other citation style videos, which include APA, MLA, and the Chicago Manual of Style's author date citation method. Writers looking for information on specific citation or formatting puzzles can find a much more thorough summary of Chicago style in the Chicago Manual of Style 16th edition and Turabian's A Manual for Writers 8th edition. You will likely find these two books in your local library or writing center. Here is the list of documents I consulted while making this video. They are, of course, listed according to Chicago formatting guidelines. Thanks again for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in all your writing and researching endeavors.